1 week ago, the world was a different place, but after Israel hit Iranian nuclear and military sites, the region and international system are set to see drastic changes. The attack leaves key facilities damaged, top commanders killed, and both nations bracing for what may come next. Tehran has retaliated with a barrage of missiles against Israel. In the short term, the risk of escalation is clear, but the long-term impact could reshape the region's power balance for years to come. A weakened Iran could have ripple effects far beyond its borders. Could this embolden Azerbaijan to push for the long-delayed Zangezur corridor at Iran's expense? And with Tehran distracted, might Turkey advance its own security and energy interests across Iraq and Syria? Arab states are also watching closely. If Iran's influence wanes, could new momentum build for expanding the Abraham Accords? And then there's China. How far is Beijing willing to let this conflict spiral before its red lines are crossed? Would a direct US military role trigger a response from China or coordinated action with Russia? The strikes may have lasted for days, but the questions raised by this conflict for the Middle East and far beyond could shape the next decade. Joining me now is Ramzi Ezzaldin Ramzi. He's the former Assistant UN Secretary General. Sir, thanks for joining me. There's a lot I want to discuss. Obviously, everyone's talking about the Iranian-Israeli conflict right now. And in your former capacity as Assistant UN Secretary General, I think the big question is, what role do you expect the organization to play in this conflict? Can it work towards peace? Can it play a proactive role? Because we've seen the UN come up short in Ukraine, in Gaza, in other conflicts. Has it learned?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Well, I mean, as you know, the UN was created to make peace. Of course, the record has been quite spotty, as you indicated. But on this particular issue, I think something needs to be done. Yesterday, a group of Islamic and Arab countries issued a statement. I hope that this statement will be taken a step further by some sort of action in the Security Council. These attacks, the Israeli attack and the Iranian retaliation, should be stopped as soon as possible. And I think this is where the Security Council can play a role. Now, whether a Security Council resolution will be adopted remains to be seen, but I think some action needs to be done at the Security Council and as soon as possible.
You know, as people of the region, we just experienced the Arab Spring over the past decade, and we saw how one conflict can spread in the risk of contagion for a wider regional war. How concerned are you that this can spill over and create some type of powder keg scenario for the region again, which seemed to be at least stabilizing a little when we look at the Arab Spring in the 2010s?
Well, I mean, I think we should go back about a year and a half or more. I think this whole thing started with Gaza and what Israel has been doing in Gaza. After Gaza, Israel moved to South Lebanon, Syria, and now the ultimate prize is Iran. And it is, in my view, part of the Israeli project in redesigning the entire region to meet its own security interests. So I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think it's going to work. I think there will be pushback by many. And I'm quite concerned by something I came across. I cannot confirm it nor verify it, but it seems that there are indications that Pakistan may be drawn into this whole thing. I mean, it apparently has indicated that it's prepared to use its military assets in protecting Iran. Iranians have even indicated that it may even provide them with a nuclear umbrella. So, I mean, this is serious because what will be the Indian reaction? If you're talking about spillover, this is it. And you're not talking about a spillover that includes Russia or China or the United States. But at this point of time, even in the region, there is serious concern about the situation getting out of hand. And that's why we need to do something as soon as possible. But But I mean, with Israel having backing from many countries, and I must say here, I am extremely concerned not only about the position of the United States, although the United States, I think President Trump has indicated that he wants to go back to negotiations, but at the same time there are very concerning, I think, actions that indicate that a military option by the United States is not off the table. And I'm not very sure that helps the negotiating process. The Europeans have not taken a position that I think is conducive to de-escalation, quite frankly. I mean, they have not condemned Israel, but they have condemned Iran. So I am concerned, and I hope that the initiative, like I indicated earlier, by the Islamic and Arab countries will, I would think, develop in an actionable direction.
Now, Trump campaigned on peace, but it seems that Netanyahu is very intent on trying to drag the Americans in. Do you think that he's going to be able to hold off the Israeli influence on the White House, or the Americans are somehow going to get dragged into this war as well?
Well, I mean, I've been following the Iranian nuclear dossier, so to speak, since 2003. At the time, I was the Egyptian permanent representative to the International Atomic Energy Agency, so I've been through this whole process and followed it through. Since 2003, the Israelis have been trying to drag in the Americans. Now, they've reached the point now where it seems that the U.S. may be dragged into it, in spite of the fact that President Trump has made it very clear that he does not want to get involved militarily anywhere in the world. And I think a good part of his constituency, maybe the major part of his constituency, the MAGA group, are completely against that. But the Israelis have their way.
In your professional opinion, how close are the Iranians to having the necessary material for a nuclear bomb, or at least a dirty bomb, something that could create a mass casualty event, a weapon of mass destruction? I know that sounds familiar hearing that word. When you claim someone in the Middle East has a weapon of mass destruction, but could that be a reality in the near future?
Well, I mean, before I answer this question, I think the international media is missing a point. Israel has nuclear weapons. And I think that is the main problem, quite frankly, not Iran. Iran has the intention, it wants to have a capability to produce the weapon. Now, how close Iran is to producing a nuclear weapon, I think you made a very important point. It has the material for a bomb. Now, material, which is the fissionable material, which is enriched uranium, is the first step. You have to weaponize it, then you have to put it on a missile. It's a process, and I don't think Iran is there yet. Like I indicated earlier, in 2003, the Israelis were saying they're a few months away. Now, of course, over the 20 years, and particularly after 2015, after 2018, when the United States pulled out of JCPOA, the Iranians have accelerated their program. Now, how close they are to a bomb, I mean, nobody really knows, but I don't think it's around the corner. There is still a long process until they have a bomb. Now, the issue is a dirty bomb. Will it serve the would it serve the Iranians? I mean, transporting it, putting it inside Israel, and then detonating it? I think this is beyond the realm of the possible.
It seems like fear-mongering to me as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's beyond the realm of, it's not going to happen that way. And they have no interest in that. And I think the Iranians want the capability. Now, this whole thing can be resolved if you're able to put in place a regional security system which has a very definite component of a nuclear weapon-free zone, which would deal with Iran, but certainly with Israelis' nuclear weapons. And I think that is critical.
Now, Iran's not isolated, though. It has its own backers, it has its own allies, and amongst them, Russia and China, two superpowers that view Iran as a very important strategic partner. How long will they sit on the sidelines and allow this natural progression to go? Will they allow for a regime change? Will they let a regime change create a shift in axis for Iran? Or will there be a red line somewhere where they'll be like, oh, hold on, we need to begin an intervention here?
Now, will Russia and China accept a regime change in Iran, I mean, if a regime change happens in Iran because the Iranians want it, I don't think the Russians or the Chinese will do very much about it. And I think what the real objective of the Netanyahu government, particularly Prime Minister Netanyahu, has been all along regime change. I mean, you can tell from the targeting. It's not just a nuclear weapon program. They're targeting a lot of other things, all of them to generate an internal dynamic that will bring about change in Iran. And I think that's a very dangerous game to play, and as you know, and I think the Russians and the Chinese will try to prevent that to the extent that they can. Now, how much influence they have inside Iran, I'm not very sure, but I think they will do whatever they can to stop that.
How are these developments going to impact Syria? I know you spent a lot of time on the Syria file, something you follow very closely. Obviously, the Turks are very interested in bringing stability back there. Is this going to be very detrimental, or is this something that Syria can isolate and shield itself from?
Well, like I said, this whole thing, it's an arc starting from Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and now Iran. So they're all interconnected, part of the Israeli project in re-engineering the region. So I don't see Syria being able to bring itself out of this. I don't think so. Because what Israel is trying to do is trying to neutralize any threat, directly and indirectly, by creating huge buffer zones around it, and ultimately getting rid of the present regime in Iran. So Syria already now is in a very difficult position. Israel is basically, from a military point of view, has neutralized southern Syria. Now, is that sustainable? I don't think so. It is sustainable if they're able to defeat Iran and force their vision on the entire region. Short of that, I don't think it is. So I think Syria has its own problems, quite frankly. It has enormous problems. And Israel's action inside Syria is not helping.
I want to tap into your experience as a high-level diplomat in Egypt, also former Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs. How are the Egyptians looking at what's happening, but also GCC countries? I know many GCC countries, aside from Qatar, view Iran as a threat. So is this a positive development, or is this type of destabilization concerning for them?
Well, I think I will group Egypt and the GCC when it comes to how they view the future of the region. I think Gaza was a watershed. Before Gaza, there were the Abraham Accords. There were a number of countries have joined, and it looked like a normalization with Israel was the game, main game in town. After Gaza, I think most countries have revised their position, in my view. And there is concern about Israel trying to force its vision on everybody else. And I don't think, as Arabs, we would like to have any hegemon in the region, whether it is Israel, and particularly Israel, or for that matter, Iran tried unsuccessfully, or even Turkey. But Turkey has changed its position, and I think there is a huge margin for cooperation between Turkey and the Arab countries, and particularly with Egypt, to try to regain stability to the region, put together a security system that would, serve the interests of all involved. Now, Iran, and I think here again, Egypt and the GCC had very, very similar positions. There was a concern, of course, about Iranian policies in the region for a long period of time, as you know, to the extent that the GCC were against the JCPOA. They were vehemently against. At that point, both Israel and the GCC were against it. Today, the Gulf countries have normalized relations with Iran, have worked with Iran, and are for a nuclear deal with Iran. And why is that? Because they have realized that they cannot depend on the United States to defend their security. We have seen when Iran struck the Aramco facilities a few years ago, the Americans did not And it was during the first Trump.
There seems to be a trend towards a regional security mechanism. I want to ask you one last question because we're running out of time. You touched on the Turks. How are they viewing this? What are the challenges and opportunities that are in front of Turkey during this process?
Well, I mean, Turkey is a very important actor in the Middle East. It has good relations with everybody, including Israel, relatively, with other countries. I think there are two areas where Turkey can play an important role. I think, but in my view, it has to cooperate with the Arab countries. Syria, I think it's important that the Arab countries and Turkey cooperate in bringing back stability and putting Syria on the right track. At this point of time, there are a lot of question marks about where Syria is heading. But I think we need to help the present government in creating a Syria that is acceptable to all Syrians. And of course on Iran. On Iran, Turkey has an important role, it has good relations with Iran, but also with the United States and Russia. And here again, it can cooperate with the Arab countries, the GCC and Egypt, in very quickly putting an end to the present escalation and moving this whole process to stability and a peaceful situation.
Well, it looks like dangerous and interesting times ahead for our region once again. Ramzi Azzeldin Ramzi, thank you for joining me. Really appreciate your commentary.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
For more, I'm joined by Guochang Gang. He's a professor at the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. Professor, thanks for joining me. Now, there's been a lot of global discussion about what's happening between Israel and Iran. Obviously, the two belligerents of this conflict, Israel and Iran, discussed thoroughly. Also, a lot of questions about the United States, will they directly participate or not, and also the regional countries. But I feel one of the topics not being discussed is what China's thinking and what China might do in an event that causes concern for it. So let's begin by what's China's position right now on developments between Israel and Iran.
So talking about China's position in the Israel-Iran, it's not conflict, actually war. I think our foreign ministry make very clear. Our foreign minister Wang Yi make phone calls to his counterpart of Iran and also Israel, and our minister also condemned the attack, Israeli attack on Iran. I think this is make very clear Chinese position and attitude, and also, Shanghai Organization also condemned the Israeli attack on Iran, and our foreign ministry also make clear to condemn the Israeli attack on Iran. I think this is make it very clear of China's position towards this conflict or this war.
When we looked at the recent skirmish between Pakistan and India, there were reports that the Chinese supplied very important and highly sophisticated missiles to the Pakistanis. Do you foresee any scenarios where the Chinese might give material support to Iran?
Actually, I don't think so, but I think China, Iran always keep very good relations or very close relations, and has a normal trade, bilateral trade. For bilateral trade, I think we can do a lot of things, but I don't think China will sell very high-tech weapons to Iran. I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Because when I look at China's foreign policy portfolio, Iran and Pakistan seem to be the biggest gains for China outside of its general Southeast Asian neighborhood and its general allies. Is it concerning for Beijing if the Iranians would all of a sudden become a pro-Western country? Would that be a big concern? Is that a result that the Chinese want to avoid?
Firstly, I want to say that China want to keep a very good relation with the neighborhood. Actually, every country wants have a good relation with the neighborhood countries. I think this is most important. For say the possible or potential regime change in Iran, I think for China it's always for China for not interfering other countries in affairs. I think this is the fundamental rule. I don't think China will do something beyond the fundamental rule.
What would China's position be if the United States takes a more direct approach to the conflict and directly starts participating, sending military assets to strike Iran, or even putting boots on the ground on Iranian soil? Would those be red lines for China?
Yeah, for that, I think United States always do something like that. You know, he sent troops to Afghanistan, to Iraq, everywhere. Always United States send troops to every corners of the globe. But I don't think China will take special actions this time if, say, United States involves directly. I think the situation like in Afghanistan, in Iraq, or in Syria, in Libya, I think China will keep the same position. China always try to solve the problems in the framework or under the framework of the United Nations. I think this time China will still stick to these fundamental rules to try to solve the problems or the conflict under the framework of United Nations.
What type of leverage do you foresee China using to try to get Israel to the table, Iran back to the negotiating table? Or do you foresee maybe the Shanghai Cooperation Organization using some of its influence? At the moment, it seems like both sides are away from the table. So it's going to take some influence and some cajoling to get them back. What can China do in this position?
So firstly, as I just said, Shanghai Organization actually condemned the Israeli attack on Iran. But the Shanghai Organization is not military allies. It is for anti-terrorism or economic collaboration. It's not a military group. This is most important. But as a member of Shanghai Organization, I think the organization must to support their members. I think this is the organization should do. But what the Shanghai Organization can do is another issue. But most importantly, I think it's not a military allies. It's not a military group. This is most important, I think.
Right now, after Gaza, we've seen the Chinese condemn the Israel operation against the Palestinians. We've also seen the Chinese condemn the attack on Iran. Mm-hmm. How is the relationship right now between China and Israel?
Actually, we are still wait and look. China, Israel always keep very close relations. But according to social media, you know, the social media will reflect some ordinary people's attitude. Actually, in the social media, Chinese people actually now seems the feelings a little change. But I think bilateral relations is another issue, I think.
Mm-hmm. I also want to ask about Syria because it's obviously a neighbor to Iran and Israel, an area where Turkey is very influential and an area that seems to be interesting China for development and investment to rebuild the country. Is there room for Turkey and China to cooperate?
I think for Syria issue, it's really to the concern of China. Not only because of China always persists that nation or region should be stable, keep stability. So now the situation in Syria to the concern of China, I think first the political stability. Otherwise, there will be a lot of problems, say terrorism problems. I think this is to the much concern for China.
Professor Guo Changgang, thank you for joining me. You've been watching a special edition of Straight Talk from Boğaziçi University. Thanks for joining me. I'm Yusuf Erim. I hope you enjoyed the commentary.